Today we have Mr. Dennis Voss to lead the webinar on intercultural communication, how to interact successfully in a globalized world. Dennis Voss holds an MBA in International Strategic Management and Marketing from the Hong Kong Metropolitan University, formerly known as the Open University of Hong Kong, where he was mentioned in the Dean's List for significant achievements. He worked in small and medium and multinational enterprises in Europe, Asia, and North America and visited 55 countries. In 2018, Dennis settled with his family in Ontario, Canada, where he's a business and intelligence analyst and project controller at 𝐒𝐫𝐳 Consulting Engineers. Currently, he is pursuing his doctorate in business administration at EBS. To all attendees, if you have any questions or need clarifications, you can write in the Q&A section. We will answer them towards the end of the session. Let's all join the enriching webinar now. Mr. Dennis, over to you.
Thank you very much, Shiba. Good evening, good afternoon, good morning. So as you heard, my name is Dennis. I'm at the moment in Canada, so we just had a snowstorm, -10 degrees. I bet the weather in the Emirates and all over the places are much more different. But yeah, we're having the winter here. Let me start with my presentation. So I will talk about intercultural communication, and we have around 45 minutes. Of course, this topic can be extended very much, but I try to give you an overview and try to give you a few tools on your way that will make it easier for you to understand your own culture, but also other cultures, so it's easier for you to interact between them, which is becoming more and more important with the globalized world we have right now, and it's a continuing process. So who is Dennis Voss? A few pictures of my life. I was born in Germany in 1986. And I'm married and I have 2 rescue dogs. So since I was a boy, I always had dogs and there always were rescues. So that's a big part of my life. You can see in the picture, we have a very small sailing boat. That's how we spend our shorter Canadian summers on the lakes. A little bit background about me. So I started in hotel industry in 2012. However, hotel industry, very bad working times and the payment was not so good. So I started to work on a cruise ship, saved a lot of money, and then continued my studies and finished with a bachelor professional in Germany. Then I moved with my wife to China. There I did a part-time MBA with how to do business in China. But I also did the MBA later on in Hong Kong that was mentioned before. And because my motto is never stop learning, I started this year to do my DBA and will be 2026, hopefully that I will finish the program. And as mentioned before, I'm now a project controller and business analyst for a consulting company here. And I have over 10 years working experience in B2C and B2B operations. I speak German, I speak English, I speak Spanish. And whenever I go somewhere, I also try to learn at least a few words of that language just to show my respect and to communicate a little bit at least. So why am I talking about intercultural communication? Since I was small, I always wanted to see the world. My parents always said, if you want to see the world, then take the opportunities. And as being from Europe, it's quite easy to go to different places. So I'm from North Germany, just an hour drive. I'm in Denmark. It would be 3 hours driving. I would be in the Netherlands. 4 hours driving, I would be in Poland. Now here in Canada, this is a little bit more difficult. If I drive 12 hours, I'm still in Ontario and haven't crossed to any country. If I drive south, of course, I could go to the US, but that's Europe has so many different countries. It's easy to see many different cultures, which I became in contact since I was a young boy. I have lived and worked in 5 countries, and also, as I mentioned before, on a cruise ship. That also made it possible for me to explore the world and combine it with working. So I worked in Ireland, I worked in Switzerland, I lived in Spain, and I lived in Shanghai, and now I'm living in Canada. I've been part of multinational teams, and this is still going on. So Ontario is very multicultural. Even though I'm now in Canada, it's still that I'm working with multinational teams within Canada. The 55 countries were mentioned before. I really love to travel. Some usual places I have been was like North Korea, Tibet, or Mongolia, or as well Svalbard, which is an island in the Arctic Ocean, right north on the hemisphere, which I was able to go when I worked on the cruise ship. And I love different cultures and to understand them, to learn from them, and also love all kinds of food. So I always try everything. So what will I talk about today? I will talk about a little bit what does cultural and cross-cultural mean. I will talk about ethnocentric behavior. I will talk about Hofstede's 6 dimensions, which is one of many tools that can help you, but I really like that one, and I will show you later on why. And I will talk about that everything we are talking about today is to understand each other better so that we have a better time together and achieve more. So what does cross-cultural mean? Let's start first with culture. Culture is what makes us human beings. It is everything that relates to our language, to our history, to our visions, how we interact with our families, how we interact with other people, how we engage ourselves in the communities, what kind of music we like, how we are dancing to it. Are we more an extrovert or more an introvert? It all comes with culture. So it is our beliefs, it is the rules that are around us, it's all the techniques, how we work with each other, how we communicate with each other. It's the different institutions that we have, and also artifacts, which means our art. So archaeologists are learning about cultures that are not there anymore through artifacts and interpret them. It is all the social behaviors we have, the norms that we have in our human societies, or the knowledge, or the laws, or the customs. And this varies very much from different places. And this makes us what we are as humans. I really like this iceberg because it shows what is culture on the first glimpse. So it is our food, and I love to explore culture through food because it just tells me so much about a culture. If I eat the food, there is so much I can learn about it. It is our festivals, the fashions, how we dress. As you can see, everything that is surrounding us is also making what we are as a culture. But there's also deep culture. And that's something that you don't see on the first glimpse. It's not the flag of your land or the architecture. It is how we interact as humans, how we interact in groups. It is also how our courtesy and manners are. And this can differ from one country to another. It can differ by families, by regions, and countries. Of course, countries very often is the most obvious one. But if I look into a country like China, it's not just China, it is so many different cultures that we have there, minorities, that makes it so interesting. So what is cross-cultural communication? Well, that's easy. It's a dialogue or interaction if we are coming from different backgrounds. And even you live in the same country, the same region, and the same town, maybe the same street, but maybe the family on the other side of the street if you interact with them, maybe it's already different to them. So somehow you can call that it's already cross-cultural communication. So why is it difficult? And I will give some examples here. There's a perception and frames of reference. So we have different perceptions of time. And talking about time, and me, myself being German, most Germans really like to be on time. If we tell 3 o'clock next week on Monday, we will be there 10 to 50 minutes before 3 o'clock because we want to make sure that we are on time at 3 o'clock. But other cultures, other countries might have a different perspective of time, that it will say, for me, it's still punctual if I'm there at 4 o'clock, maybe. For me, it's still punctual if I'm there a quarter after 3. And there it already starts when you have business appointments that this is colliding. And if you don't understand the other one, then there might be a bad outcome. You might be in a bad mood. But here it comes to the understanding. And if you go somewhere, you also need to adapt a little bit. It also has to do with the color associations. And I will show that a little bit more on the next slide. So hold on that a little bit more. We have, of course, the language issues. Spoken, written language, all that can be difficult. When I moved to China, I didn't speak any Chinese. And I started to learn Chinese, and there was a little shop lady next to our apartment. And I tried to communicate with her, but my Chinese was so bad, we couldn't understand each other really. And then she took a paper and a pen and she wrote down the characters. And my understanding was, if I really don't understand you or speak your language, then I'm also don't be able to read your characters, right? But on her perspective, it was, I'm from a different region. Maybe he is not understanding my Mandarin. So we have to communicate through the characters because that's everywhere in China the same. But how to pronounce them is totally different all over the place. So we both had a different approach on this. But it also can come up with misinterpretations, mistakes, and regional differences and accents. So if I speak to someone in South Germany from the mountains, I might have a very difficult time to understand him, even though we are living in the same country. But there's also the nonverbal. It's a conversational distance. And I will show you on next slide a picture how this differs from country to country. But it also is how we communicate. Nordic countries might use their hands less when they're talking. And Italians, for example, are very famous to use their hands and whole body to underlie their way of communication, which can be for someone from a Nordic country a little bit overwhelming because they're not used to it. Of course, nowadays, we are more aware of such things, but imagine 50 years back, if travel was not as common as today, it must have been a totally different thing and also might have led to more misunderstandings back then. Remember the distance thing I talked about? This is Norwegian bus stop, and you can see there are no rules in place, but people like to have their distance between them. This might be totally different in Egypt, for example, where people gather together, might start to do small talk with each other. Here you hang around more by yourself, and it would be strange if you would go very close to one of those persons and start to small talk because it's just not a common thing there. We're coming here to the colors, and it's just very a generalization I'm making, but it's an assumption we can do and how it differs. So if I take, for example, red, in India, this would represent wealth, power, beauty. You will see it when someone is attending a wedding. In South Africa, it also could represent mourning. And in China, it would be luck, prosperity, or long life. So if you are giving someone money, it always would be in a red envelope in China because it would add more luck to this money. If we look into green, in Western countries, we would say that's representing spring. Also could be jealousy, that's a thing in Germany, or luck in Ireland. So St. Patrick's Day is around the corner. Everyone will be run around in green. In South America, this also could mean death. In most Asian countries, it's new and eternal life or youth. And you have to remind yourself, if you're especially in international marketing, if you want to come up with a campaign, be aware that you can't use usually the same campaign from your home country and just use it worldwide, because there will be different interpretations of colors, of the style of your campaign. One thing, for example, especially in the Chinese cultures, a green colored hat for men is taboo, because wearing a green hat is Dai Lu Mao Zi. And that sounds very, very similar to the expression that someone's wife or girlfriend is cheating on him. So if your friends in China are giving you a green hat, it's very obvious what they want to tell you. If you're a foreigner, you didn't know, this might become very complicated to explain that, right? What does intercultural communication make it even more complicated? It's our ethnocentric behavior. And we all have it. It's a human thing, because our culture is the closest to us. It is what we understand the best. It's what we grew up with. But if we understand what ethnocentric means, and if we go around the world and interact with other people, to be aware that this thing is a thing will help you to avoid it more. There's an example, a friend of mine, he is working on a ship. It was a cargo ship, 15 people on board. He was an officer and the captain was German, very German. And in the next harbor, they had to get provisions. And the captain made the decision, he only will load potatoes instead of rice. So they left the harbor, but most of the crew were from the Philippines. And they love the rice. They need the rice for every meal. And they realized the captain didn't order rice. He only ordered potatoes because he loved potatoes. And if he loves potatoes, everyone should love potatoes. That became a big problem because the Filipinos said, no rice, no good work. So they had to turn around at a certain point and get rice because they needed it so much. And this is a very good example of ethnocentric behavior. Only because the captain thinks potatoes is good enough for everyone doesn't mean does it work for everyone. So ethnocentrism is the belief that your culture is natural and correct. It is what we grew up with, right? It is what we are comfortable with most of the time. While other people's cultures are incorrect, unnatural, or are even inferior. That could be, for example, if you have a manager and he only hires employees from their own culture, that could be an ethnocentric behavior there. The thing we talked about with the captain before, with the potatoes thing, and potatoes are a big thing in Germany, he wanted to put his own cultural norms and values on the whole ship. Very ethnocentric, didn't work, right? So he had to step back and make it correct. Otherwise, a multinational crew on a ship will not work this way. It is always also the perspective you have. So on the left-hand side, we have one country and they say our blessed homeland, our glorious leader, our great religion, our noble populace, and our heroic adventurers. The island on the other side, they might think totally different of that, like the wicked despot, the primitive superstition, the backward savages, the British invaders. So always keep in mind, there are always two sides to a coin. This is one I really like. if someone asks me, what's your favorite food? Then I can't tell them. So I have to tell them from which region, because there's so much good food all over the place. I couldn't decide which is my favorite one, but I could say in Germany, it would be that one, or in Canada, it would be that. And even China, I couldn't say my favorite Chinese food. No, I would have to say from northern part of China, that would be my favorite. But this is a very classical example that you believe that your own cuisine is the best and nothing comes to it. That's fine, but I would expect a little bit more, especially when you travel to foreign country. Just don't eat only at a German restaurant because I'm German. If I travel, I want to try the cuisines of the locals. It is also about stereotypes. And because I'm German, I thought I will talk about German stereotypes. So there's no way I really can offend someone. And I think this is a very good stereotype. If people hear or think about Germany, that's one of the first pictures I'm quite sure many people have on their minds. And it's this Lederhosen and the Tracht. It's a very folklore thing. But be aware, this is only a thing in southern Germany and Bavaria. And it's part of Germany, but it's not whole Germany. So I never had them, I never wore them, and probably will never wear them. And this is a very good stereotype. There's also stereotypes that Germans love to be on time. And I would say for most Germans, that's very correct. But I also know Germans who struggle to be on time. So it is a generalization. But if you come down to the individual, that might look different. There's also a stereotype that Germans are very serious and humorless. So I always try to surprise people that I'm quite a funny guy. There's a stereotype that we are always drinking beer. Usually I don't like beer. So I'm really an anti-stereotype sometimes to this, what we have. One thing that is really true is that we Germans love our different kinds of bread. We have so many breads, and next week I will fly home to Germany for a wedding, and I can't wait to go to a German bakery and enjoy all the bread that I'm really missing, that it's difficult to find if you're abroad. Let's continue with Hofstede's 6 dimensions and how it can help you. It is from a socialist from the Netherlands, and he studied different cultures and came up with a system to better compare cultures and better to understand your own culture and different cultures. And I will show you how it works. It's quite easy, and it's an easy tool that you can use before you travel to another country, or before you have a business meeting with someone from a country where you haven't interacted yet, because it will show the differences between your own culture and the other culture. And as every tool, it has its limitations. There's a generalization in it as well, but it gives you an idea how it works. And the list is including most countries on this planet, but you won't find all of them because it's, of course, a very time-intensive study you have to do there. But it's looking into how that culture is in terms of individualism and collectivism. It will look into the power distance, if it's large or small in that population. It will look into the uncertainty avoidance, if it's very strong or weak. And it will talk how masculine or feminine that culture is. But I will talk about that more later on the next slides. It will also talk about the time orientation, if the culture is more long-term orientated or short-term orientated. That will help you very much if you try to do business. And if that culture is restrained or more indulgence. I will now go through all those and try to explain them a little bit. So here we have the power distance. A low power distance example would be an organization. It would be very flat, not too hierarchical. Supervisors and employees are considered almost equal. And examples for that would be like the Netherlands, United Kingdom, the US, Germany. Of course, it can be different from company to company, but you can work with that idea, like also Nordic countries, that the power distance is not too big. Vice versa, in a high power distance culture, the employees believe that the supervisors are always correct. You wouldn't say that they are not correct, or you wouldn't do it in a team meeting. Maybe you would approach them afterwards if you would dare. If employees get a task, they usually just follow the procedure and wouldn't dare to maybe do shortcuts. And we can find that relationship, for example, in Malaysia, the Philippines, Indonesia, Russia, and China. But as I said, there are always assumptions, but it gives you an idea. It also would be, for example, in a high power distance culture, that a student would never argue with their professor. And that would be maybe in another country totally different, that the students continuously would challenge the professor. Here we're talking about individualistic and collective. Individualistic culture, people look more after themselves and maybe the very short closest family they have. There's a big desire for personal freedom, time, and challenge. And you probably not surprised would see this in a very big time in the United States, also in Germany, Ireland, or Australia. But on the other side, there are also collectivistic countries where people belong more to groups like villages, clans, and they exchange like loyalty to look after them. And you see this also more in very big enterprises that you have in Asia, like Samsung, where you really become part of that company and it's like a family. And you very often see this in China, in Japan, Indonesia, India, Ghana, or Guatemala. Here we have the feminine and masculine characters that Hofstede mentioned. And there's a little problem because we think it's a gender thing, but that was not what Mr. Hofstede intended. And it is more a cultural dimension that would be better pronounced or named like process-oriented versus goal-orientated. But so far, the science stick to this feminine and masculine. And because it's out there in the internet, I will continue those expressions. And then it would be like a more feminine culture would empathize more on relationships and the concern of others or the overall quality of life. Equality is very important in those cultures. People don't try to push only their solution. It's more like a consensus so that more or less everyone is happy. And there's also sympathy for the loser, right? So here in Canada, it's very much, if there's competitive sport in the schools, there's no loser because everyone is a winner. And you can discuss that approach, of course. And very big examples of those cultures is all the Nordic countries in Europe, Sweden, Norway, but also the Netherlands. And what I've heard, also Costa Rica. On the other side, the more masculine cultures hold more position of power. Men might get paid more and might be expected to act more in masculine manner. So there's a tendency that people who have access want to show it with a big, expensive car, very expensive watches, big villas. So people see that you have achieved something. That wouldn't be the case in more Nordic countries where there's more understatement. Winning is good. You would tell your kids, if you go to a soccer game, you want to win. Not everyone is a winner. You try to win. There's more competition going on. And examples of that is in the United States, Mexico, China, Italy, or Japan, for example. We have the uncertainty avoidance, which can be low. And you accept and feel comfortable in an unstructured situation or changeable environments. You try to have not too many rules in place. You want to be flexible. And you want to be agile, pragmatic, and open to change. And you can find that very much in United States, Ireland, Singapore, and Denmark, where there's not too much regulation also from the government. But if you have a high uncertainty avoidance, you want a difference. So you really plan to the future, long term. The need for immediate versus delayed gratification is different, right? You don't want to have it right away. You might be happy if you get the reward later on. But it also could be that you can't do much about it because there's a higher power that is controlling the things. And employees in high uncertainty avoidance cultures tend to stay with their organizations longer. So if you're in South Korea and you become part of Samsung, usually you stay the whole life there because it gives you security, right? It is also, if you join the public service in Germany, you become a special status that you will not lose that job anymore until you retire. That is a very high uncertainty avoidance thing if you join the public service in Germany. And you see that in Japan, Greece, Korea, Portugal. We have here the short-term orientation and the long-term orientation. Short-term orientation is achieving quick results. You want to get it done quick and dirty. There's more rather I than we. I want to win. There's a focus on the present or past. And I want to live now in a good way. I want to make more money now. That's the idea of it. If we think about buying a house, short-term orientated cultures would probably more go with the flexible rate of mortgages, because there always might be the possibility that the rates might go down and you gain from that. But you also have the risk that the rates might go up, like we have it now the case, then it's not so good. And you see that very much in the United States, Canada, and the United Kingdom. So many people here in Canada, they have a variable rate mortgage. And at the moment, it's quite tough for them. If you go for long-term orientation, they are more about the persistence, preservance, and adaptability. There's more at we than rather than I. We as a group, we as a nation. And they also tend to be more fixed mortgage for many years. And I already can say Germany is more on a long-term orientation. And I can tell you, I bought a house last year. We went with a fixed mortgage because that's more comfortable with my cultural background. But very good examples for that orientation is like China, Japan, or South Korea. We have one more of those 6 Hofstedes. The restraint and indulgence. Restraint cultures, there is more value, duty over pleasure. If things need to be done, you will do it. If your family needs your help, then you don't go out with your friends, you will help your family. It also might be a more tighter society, maintaining order. And you can be motivated with material rewards. So if I pay more, you might stay for the weekend, right? Work over the weekend, you get overpay. might motivate you. There's more moral discipline in such cultures. And what happens to me is not my own doing. So there are all external factors that are influencing me and what I can do. And we see such behavior like in Pakistan or Egypt, Latvia, Ukraine, Albania, Belarus, Estonia, and Iraq. On the other side, you have other cultures that focus more on indulgence. They want their freedom. It is one of their fundamental things they want. They don't want to be restricted too much. They want to be free as individuals. Usually, they wouldn't accept a job that wouldn't fit their needs, where they might work during the night shifts every weekend. They might get more money in that job, but they would not accept it because they want more the quality of life, more work-life balance. It's more loser society where you don't interact too much with others. So if you, for example, in Germany live in a residential house with, I don't know, 10 units, there might be a possibility that you have never said a word to your direct next neighbor. And that might be totally different in other countries where you know the whole house and everyone is helping each other. We have here examples like Australia, Canada, Argentina, and Chile. And I talked now about all the different Hofstede's dimensions. And this is free. It's hofstedeinsights.com, compare countries. And there, that's a great thing. And that's why I'm talking about it. You can enter the countries you want to compare. So you go to the link, that's their homepage. It's totally free. And you have all these different countries, and it will show you the 6 dimensions comparing each country. And let's try Germany and the United Arab Emirates. And if you go in there, 1 second. It will show you this. And on the homepage itself, it just didn't work right. So I have this example right here. You can compare the both countries, can compare your own culture and the other culture, and then see how you can interact more successfully to understand them. And if we go there and see the power distance, if you all remember power distance, high and low, there's a much lower power distance in Germany compared to the Emirates, which means if you're working there and you have a manager from the Emirates, you might have to interact with him differently or her compared to Germany. Or if you're a student there, there will be more respect between a student in the Emirates and the teacher compared to Germany. So you need to be aware of that. So you have to be aware that you need to focus on that more. If you look into the individualism, it is much higher in Germany. So more individualism is going on in Germany compared to the Emirates. So you have to see that there's less I, there's more we going on. If you might go to meetings, it might be not one-to-one. There might be more people on the table. You have to approach them more and also become part of that cycle. It is more that business and pleasure time are interwoven with each other, where in Germany that would be very strict. It's business and business and private is private. So you have to keep that in mind. Masculinity-wise, both countries are very similar. If you achieve something, Yen, you don't mind to buy a Porsche and show it, right? If you got your promotion and you buy your Rolex, then you buy your Rolex, right? That will be very similar. Uncertainty avoidance as well between German culture and the Emirates culture, very, very similar. Both want to avoid uncertainty. People want that things will happen as planned. Time is money, and security is a very important element for them. If we look into long-term orientation, we see, I think it's the biggest gap. Germany, very long-term orientated. When you're 18, you start to think about your retirement plans and so on, start to pay in. That's very long-term oriented. What I see here, and you can correct me later on, United Arab Emirates is much more short-term orientated. It is, you want the success now. If you can make a good bargain, you want to make that bargain now. And that can be a challenge for business relations because this will collide very much. So you need to see how you can find a way through this with your partners and to understand the two different things you have there. And the last point, it is indulgence. Both are not very high, but it's higher in Germany than the Emirates. So there might be more social rules in the Emirates than it's in Germany. So you should get a book, read more about the culture, how to behave in the Emirates, so you don't make any big mistakes. And just be aware that just those two cultures are different. There are similarities, focus on them. Don't focus too much on the differences, but be aware of them and take your advantage. Show your host in the Emirates that you read about the culture, that you have a certain understanding about it, and show that you have the respect for it. And I just invite you, go to Hofstede's homepage. There are much more explanations, also written texts that go deeper into it when you compare the countries, and you can compare up to 4 countries at the same time. It's interesting to see how different they are. Just to let you know, there are many more other tools you can use. There's also the Levis model. I will just talk about it very briefly, also regarding the time. But just that you're aware there are different tools. And it's a totally different approach that Levis took here. And he's categorizing the countries in more linear active countries, multi-active countries, and reactive countries. And the further you apart from the other one, of course, the more challenging, but also the more interesting it gets to interact with those cultures. And just so you're aware of it. So understanding each other starts with understand your own culture. And you can do that with Hofstede. It will give you an idea how he thinks your culture is working, and you might reflect on that. And it starts with understanding the other culture. If you use Hofstede and you see very big differences in one of the dimensions, try to find out more about it and take it as an advantage if you're a businessman. Try to take the time to understand the differences, but also be flexible and understand the other side. Before you go somewhere, try to learn some basic words before you go there. And if you meet someone, that you can greet them at least in that language. And maybe your pronunciation will not be 100% correct, but I'm pretty sure they will appreciate it. If you visit a foreign country, of course, that might be very clear, but follow the customs of the people who live there. And if you're unfamiliar what is going on, then follow the lead of those who are in the ropes, right? There's a saying, and I think that's a very good thing, and it's still actual. When in Rome, do as the Romans do, right? Don't try to push your cultures through it or tell them, oh, in Germany, we're always on time and you guys never on time. I've been all over the world and I have met great people and I have met not so great people. That's not a cultural thing. It's a human thing. With some people, you get along very well, with others, not so much. And this will help us to understand each other much better. And this process will continue. So be open-minded, be respectful, be willing to learn about different cultures, adapt to different cultures and norms and expectations as far as you are comfortable with. And try then to communicate as effectively as possible. And that everyone has a good time and that you achieve your business goals or that you achieve your goals that you have visiting that country, and it will make your life easier. So I hope you like this. There's much more to talk about. There are many more examples I could give. Of course, the time was limited. Feel free to add me on LinkedIn. You also have my email there. But otherwise, thank you so much